The Galactic Empire had ruled over the stars for countless centuries, a vast and powerful force that had crushed any who dared to challenge it. Their ships, massive and sleek, glided through space, their weapons capable of annihilating entire planets. The Empire had no rivals, no equal. They considered themselves the greatest civilization in the galaxy, their advanced technology unmatched. But all of that was about to change. Far across the stars, on a small and relatively insignificant planet called Earth, a group of explorers was about to make a discovery that would shake the very foundations of the Empire. The crew of the Endeavour, a human exploration vessel, had been traveling through the galaxy for several months. Earth's fledgling space program was still in its infancy, and the ship's mission was simple: to chart new stars and gather information about distant worlds. The crew, led by Captain Elaine Torres, were proud of their accomplishments, even if their technology was rudimentary by galactic standards. They had no illusions about their place in the universe, yet. As they sailed through an uncharted sector, their sensors detected something strange. An unknown force field was disrupting their communications and navigation systems. The Endeavour was suddenly pulled off course, drifting into a region of space that the humans had never encountered before. Unbeknownst to them, they had crossed into Imperial space. It was an area that had been marked as restricted by the Galactic Empire, a place where no species, except the Empire, was allowed. Inside the Empire, their first response was typical. An alarm went off in the Imperial Command Center as the Endeavour appeared on their radar. An alien race, a primitive species traveling through their space. It was no more than a nuisance, a minor annoyance that would be quickly dealt with. The Empire didn't even bother to study the humans further. They simply decided to send a small fleet to intercept and eliminate the threat before it became one. The fleet was composed of several heavily armed warships, their hulls made of nearly indestructible materials, and their weapons capable of wiping out entire fleets. The commanders were confident the humans wouldn't even stand a chance. But they hadn't accounted for one thing: the humans were unpredictable. The Endeavour tried to send a distress signal, but the Empire's jamming systems made sure that any message sent out would never reach its intended destination. They couldn't call for help, couldn't warn anyone. The crew was completely isolated. Captain Elaine Torres stood on the bridge, looking out through the large observation window. Her heart raced. She wasn't afraid. She was a seasoned captain, after all. But she could sense something was wrong. The Endeavour wasn't supposed to be here, and now they were trapped in a part of space that seemed to be controlled by a power they didn't understand. Captain, her communications officer, Lieutenant Markson, called out, "We're getting a strange signal. It's not from any known species. It's too advanced." Torres frowned. She had a bad feeling about this. Her crew wasn't prepared for this kind of situation. They were explorers, not soldiers. Still, there was no turning back now. Before she could respond, the ship shook violently as an explosion rocked the hull. Red lights flashed, and alarms blared throughout the vessel. "What the hell was that?" Torres shouted. "Captain, we're being targeted," Markson said, his voice trembling. "It's a fleet, multiple ships, and they're coming straight at us." The humans had no idea what was coming. In an instant, the Empire's fleet arrived in their space. The ships were monstrous, towering over the Endeavour like giants. There was no time to react. The Imperial warships immediately opened fire, their weapons lighting up the dark void of space. The first blast sent the Endeavour tumbling through space. The shields were strong, but not strong enough. A second blast hit the engines, sending the ship into a freefall. Panic swept through the crew as the realization hit. They were under attack, and they were hopelessly outmatched. Captain Torres gripped the edge of her command chair, her knuckles white. She couldn't let her crew panic. There had to be a way out. With quick thinking, she ordered the crew to activate every emergency protocol they had. Shields, evasive maneuvers, anything that could give them a fighting chance. But even as the crew scrambled to execute her orders, Torres knew they were in deep trouble. The Empire didn't make mistakes. They didn't leave survivors. A message came through the speakers, cold and commanding, in a language Torres had never heard before. The alien words were harsh and sharp, and they didn't need to be translated to understand their meaning. Surrender or face destruction. Torres' eyes narrowed. She wasn't about to give in. She wasn't going to let her crew go down without a fight. But what could they do against a force like this? How could they, a small crew on a barely functional ship, stand up to an empire that controlled the galaxy? For the first time in her life, Captain Torres felt the weight of something she had never truly considered before. The scale of the universe, and just how small humanity truly was in the grand scheme of things. But in the depths of her heart, something else burned. Determination. The Empire had made a mistake. They had underestimated humans. And if they thought this would be an easy victory, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The Endeavor rocked once again as another blast struck its hull. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and alarms blared, filling the air with a chaotic wail. The crew of the ship scrambled to their posts, trying to maintain control, but it was clear that they were severely outmatched. Captain Elaine Torres remained calm, though her mind raced. The Imperial fleet was powerful. There was no doubt about that. Their ships were enormous, their weapons capable of disintegrating anything in their path. The humans aboard the Endeavor were still relatively new to space travel, and their ship was nowhere near a match for the might of the Empire. Yet despite all the odds, there was one thing that the Empire had not accounted for: humanity's refusal to give up. "Lieutenant Markson, get our shields back online." Torres barked, her voice sharp but steady. "We can't survive another hit like that." Markson's hands flew over the control panel, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Shields are at 40%, he reported, "but the backup systems are failing." "Damn it," Torres muttered under her breath. She glanced at the view screen, watching as the fleet of Imperial warships closed in, their weapons primed for another attack. The enemy ships were massive, sleek, and foreboding. In comparison, the Endeavor looked like nothing more than a speck of dust floating in space. Yet, despite the overwhelming disadvantage, Torres refused to panic. She had faced tough situations before, but this was different. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for humanity's place in the stars. She quickly turned to her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jensen, who was standing at her side. "What are our options?" Torres asked. Jensen hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning the data streams that filled the consoles around them. "We can't outrun them," she said. "We don't have the speed, and our weapons are barely functioning. But we might be able to confuse them, use their own tactics against them." Torres raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "We know their ships are programmed with AI systems to coordinate their attacks. If we can hack into their communications network, we might be able to scramble their targeting systems long enough to cause confusion," Jensen suggested. "It's risky, but it's our best shot." Torres didn't hesitate. "Do it." Jensen nodded and began typing rapidly on her console, trying to breach the Imperial network. Meanwhile, Captain Torres focused on the bigger picture. They couldn't win this fight through firepower alone. They had to outthink the Empire, find a way to outmaneuver them, even if it meant using every trick in the book. As Jensen worked, the Imperial ships drew closer, their weapons charging. Torres knew that the next few moments could be their last. But there was one thing she had learned in her years as a captain: never give up, no matter how hopeless things seemed. The first shot fired from the Imperial fleet, a powerful beam of energy that seared through space. Torres watched in horror as it sped toward them, knowing they had no way to avoid it. But just as the beam was about to hit, something unexpected happened. A sudden burst of static filled the Endeavor's communications panel, and the beam veered off course, missing them by several kilometers. The Imperial ships faltered for a moment, their movements erratic. "Did we do that?" Torres asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Jensen's fingers flew across the console. "I think so," she said. "Their targeting systems are scrambled." It worked. Torres smiled grimly. "Then let's give them a fight they'll never forget." With their weapons still limited, Torres decided to take a different approach. She ordered the crew to activate the ship's thrusters, performing a series of unpredictable maneuvers to make the Endeavor more difficult to target. It was a risk, an insane one. But if they could keep the Empire guessing, they might just have a chance. As the ship dodged and weaved through space, the Imperial fleet struggled to track their movements. The humans, using their limited technology, were managing to stay one step ahead of the massive, well-trained enemy force. "Captain," Markson called out, "I've managed to get the auxiliary cannons online. They're not much, but we can fire back." "Do it," Torres ordered. "Every shot counts." With a sudden jolt, the Endeavor fired its weakened weapons at the closest Imperial ship. The blast hit, but only caused minimal damage. The Imperial ship didn't even flinch, but Torres wasn't concerned with the result. She was buying time. Meanwhile, Jensen's efforts to hack into the Imperial network continued. Each second that passed brought them closer to disrupting the enemy's systems for good. She was relentless, her eyes fixed on the screen as lines of code flew by. The pressure was immense, but Jensen thrived under it. She knew that if she failed, the entire crew would be wiped out. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, it happened. The Imperial fleet began to panic. Their ships started firing wildly, missing their targets and colliding with one another. The once precise, cold, and calculated warships were now a chaotic mess. Torres couldn't believe her eyes. "What did you do?" Jensen looked up, her face lit with a combination of exhaustion and triumph. "I accessed their mainframe. I sent a false signal, causing their ships to misinterpret their positions. They're attacking each other." Torres felt a surge of pride. Against all odds, they had done it. They had disrupted the Empire's perfect order and turned their strength into a weakness. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a start. The humans had made their first mark in this battle. The Empire would never again underestimate them. The Endeavor was still reeling from the chaotic exchange with the Imperial fleet. Their weapons weren't powerful enough to destroy the enemy ships, but the humans had managed to achieve something far more significant. They had thrown the Empire's perfect system into disarray. In the midst of that chaos, the crew of the Endeavor found a new resolve. It wasn't enough to survive. They had to win, no matter the cost. Captain Elaine Torres stood in front of the main view screen, watching the Imperial ships retreating, their formation broken. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. For the first time since the battle began, Torres felt hope surge in her chest. "Captain," Markson called from his station, "the fleet is pulling back. It looks like they're retreating to regroup. We've bought some time." Torres nodded. "We need to use this time wisely. Start repairs on the weapons and shields. Everyone, stay sharp." The crew worked quickly, knowing the brief moment of respite could end at any time. However, it wasn't long before the Imperial fleet regrouped, their ships now more focused, their weapons primed and ready for the final assault. "Captain, the Imperial fleet is forming up again," Jensen said, her voice tight with tension. "They're bringing in reinforcements. This time, they're not just coming for us. They're coming to end this." Torres glanced at the screen, seeing the massive Imperial warships once again closing in. The odds were no longer in their favor. The Empire had learned from the chaos and was now moving with precision. But Torres wasn't about to back down. "We've beaten them once," she said, her voice low and determined. "We can do it again. This time, we need to make them realize that they've underestimated us." A plan began to form in Torres' mind. They couldn't outgun the Empire. They knew that. But what they could do was outthink them. Humanity's greatest strength, Captain Torres knew, was their creativity. They might not have the Empire's advanced technology, but they had something better: the ability to think outside the box. "Lieutenant Markson," Get me a readout of the Empire's fleet, Torres ordered. Markson quickly accessed the data. Their main force is heavily shielded, Captain. We won't be able to break through their defenses unless we target their weak points. We'll target their weak points then, Torres replied. Jensen, what's the status on that hacking attempt? Can we mess with their systems again? Jensen hesitated, her fingers flying over her console. It's possible, Captain. But the Empire's systems are designed to resist outside interference. If I try again, it could backfire. We're already walking a fine line. Torres considered this. She knew the risks, but they didn't have a choice. Do it, she ordered. We'll need every advantage we can get. As Jensen worked to infiltrate the Imperial network again, Torres turned her attention to the rest of the crew. She knew they were facing a challenge that was unlike any they had faced before. But as the humans scrambled to prepare, they did so with a sense of purpose. The Empire wasn't just attacking humanity. They were attacking the very idea of freedom, of self-determination. And if there was one thing that humans couldn't stand, it was being told they couldn't fight for their place in the galaxy. We're not backing down, Torres said to her crew, her voice rising with conviction. We're not just defending Earth. We're defending all of humanity, and we will make them understand that no one messes with us. As the Imperial fleet neared, Torres gave the order to engage. The Endeavor surged forward, its weapons ready, and its crew poised for battle. The humans might have been outgunned, but they were far from outsmarted. Captain, Jensen said suddenly, her voice filled with urgency. I've cracked their system. I've planted a virus in their command network. It should scramble their communications and targeting systems for a few minutes. Torres' heart raced. It was the opening they needed. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Let's keep them guessing. With the virus in place, the Endeavor darted between the Imperial ships, making it almost impossible for the enemy to track them. The virus took hold, and soon, the once perfect formation of the Imperial fleet began to falter. Ships veered off course, their weapons firing wildly in the wrong directions. Now's our chance, Torres shouted. Take out their command ship. That's the heart of their fleet. If we destroy it, the rest of their ships will fall apart. The Endeavor fired with all the power it had, targeting the vulnerable command ship at the heart of the Imperial fleet. The blasts hit their mark, shaking the enemy ship and causing critical damage. But just as it seemed they were winning, something unexpected happened. A massive Imperial battleship, far larger than any the humans had seen before, appeared out of nowhere. It wasn't part of the fleet's original formation, and it was armed with weapons far beyond anything the humans had faced. Torres' stomach dropped. This was the Empire's true weapon, something they had kept hidden until now. But the humans weren't going to give up. Not now, not ever. Get us out of here, Torres shouted. We need to regroup and figure out a new plan. The Endeavor pulled away from the chaos, leaving behind a trail of destruction. The Empire's fleet was still reeling, but the arrival of the battleship had shifted the balance of power once again. As the Endeavor limped to a safe distance, Torres knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The Empire had thrown everything they had at humanity, and they were still standing. The fight for survival wasn't over, but humanity had proven something crucial. They were a force to be reckoned with. And the Empire, they had only just begun to realize what they were up against. The Endeavor drifted through space, its hull scared and battered from the intense battle with the Imperial fleet. Captain Elaine Torres stood at the command station, her eyes focused on the view screen in front of her. The battle was over for now, but the Empire's massive battleship was still out there, lurking in the dark expanse of space. The humans had proven they could hold their own, but the war was far from won. We need to regroup, Torres said, her voice low but determined. The damage to the ship is extensive. Let's get the repair teams to work and see what we can salvage. We can't afford to be sitting ducks. Lieutenant Markson nodded from his post, his eyes glued to the display. The engine is still functional, but it's going to take some time to repair the weapons and shields. We've got a lot of work ahead of us." Torres sighed, rubbing her temples. The stress of the past few days was starting to wear on her, but there was no time to rest. Not when humanity's survival was on the line. The Empire had shown its power, but they had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. The Endeavor may have been a small ship compared to the vast Imperial warships, but its crew was fierce and determined. "Commander Jensen," Torres called out, turning to her first officer, "I want you to send a message to Earth. Let them know what's happening. They need to prepare for the worst." Jensen nodded and moved to her console. "Understood, Captain. I'll send the message as soon as we have a stable connection." The Endeavor was still too far from Earth to establish a secure communication link, but Torres hoped that even a message, however brief, would get through. Humanity had to know what they were up against. The Empire was coming, and they wouldn't stop until they had crushed every last trace of resistance. Meanwhile, the crew worked tirelessly to repair the ship. The sounds of tools and clanking metal filled the air as engineers scrambled to patch up the damaged systems. Despite the heavy toll the battle had taken, there was a quiet sense of determination among them. They knew that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something bigger. For the first time, humanity had come face to face with a force more powerful than anything they could have imagined. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, they had fought back. They hadn't surrendered, and they wouldn't. "Captain," Jensen called out as she returned to the bridge, "I sent the message. Earth will know what's happening, but it may take some time for them to respond." Torres nodded. "Good. We can only hope that Earth is ready. But even if they're not, we can't wait for help. We have to keep fighting." "Do you think we stand a chance?" Jensen asked quietly, as though hesitant to voice the question. Torres paused, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. "We may be small. We may be outmatched, but we're not alone. There are billions of humans out there, across the galaxy. And if we show the Empire what we're made of, maybe they'll think twice before they come for us again." As Torres spoke, the crew grew quiet, listening to her words. She wasn't just talking about the battle. They all knew that this fight was far from over. But something in her voice, something in her unshakable belief that they could win, filled the crew with a new sense of purpose. The humans aboard the Endeavor might have been outgunned, but they had one thing the Empire couldn't understand: the will to survive, the will to fight, and that would make all the difference. The following days were filled with tension. The Endeavor limped through space, barely able to move at full speed. The damage to the ship was significant, and the crew was working non-stop to get it back to full functionality. But the time they had bought in the last battle was running out. The Imperial fleet was reorganizing, and it was only a matter of time before they came back for another strike. As the days passed, Captain Torres kept her focus on the long-term plan. They needed to find a way to fight back, some way to level the playing field. The Endeavor couldn't take on the Empire's battleship head-on, not with their limited resources. But if they could find a weakness, a crack in the Empire's armor, maybe they could strike where it would hurt. "Markson," Torres called to her communications officer, "have we heard anything from Earth?" Markson shook his head. "No, Captain. The message was received, but there's still no response. We're in a dead zone, and the Empire's jamming systems are making it hard to maintain contact." Torres' jaw tightened. She had hoped for more, but the truth was clear. Earth was still too far away to help in time. They were on their own. The crew had no choice but to prepare for the next battle. Every officer, every engineer, every crew member knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a fight for the Endeavor. It was a fight for humanity's place in the stars. And they would not go down without a fight. "We don't have to beat them all," Torres said, her voice strong. "We just have to show them that humanity is worth fighting for, that we're worth saving." The crew nodded, their faces set with grim determination. The Empire had come to conquer them, But humanity had a different plan. They would fight back, whatever it took. They would make the Empire regret ever thinking they could take humanity down. The Endeavor had been drifting through space for days, the quiet hum of its engines the only sound on the bridge. The crew was exhausted, their bodies sore from endless work and little rest. Yet despite the fatigue, there was a new sense of resolve among them. They had survived the first wave of the Empire's attack, but the real test was still ahead. The Empire would be back, and they had to be ready. Captain Elaine Torres sat at the command station, staring at the view screen. The damage to the Endeavor was still severe, but it was slowly being repaired. The crew had done everything they could to keep the ship operational, and it was holding together, just barely. But the next fight would be different. They would be facing the full might of the Empire, and they couldn't afford another mistake. "Lieutenant Markson," Torres called, her voice steady but tense. "What's the status on our weapons and shields?" Markson looked up from his console, his face grim. "We've repaired the auxiliary cannons, Captain, but the main weapons are still offline. The shields are at 45% capacity, but they won't last long against the Empire's firepower." Torres nodded, her mind racing. The Endeavor wasn't built to take on a fleet like the Empire's, but they had no choice. They had to fight. "We'll make do with what we have," she said, her voice resolute. "Keep working on repairs, but we need a plan. We need a way to hit them where it hurts." Her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jensen, approached, her face serious. "I've been looking over the Imperial fleet's formations, Captain. They rely heavily on their command ships to direct their forces. If we can take out their command ship, we might be able to disrupt their entire fleet. But it won't be easy." "I don't expect it to be easy," Torres replied. "We'll need to be quick. We have no time to waste." Jensen nodded. "I'll start working on a strategy. If we can get close enough to their fleet, we might be able to slip through their defenses and take out the command ship." Torres thought for a moment, her gaze fixed on the stars. The Empire had already shown that they wouldn't hesitate to destroy humanity, but they had underestimated one thing: the humans' ability to fight back. The first battle had proven that, despite their disadvantages, humans could be a force to be reckoned with. "Captain," Markson said suddenly, breaking her thoughts, "we're receiving a signal. It's coming from Earth." Torres' heart skipped a beat. She had almost given up hope of hearing from Earth. "Put it through." A crackling voice filled the bridge, and for a moment, Torres couldn't believe what she was hearing. "This is Commander Alvarado of the United Earth Forces. We've received your message. We're mobilizing all available ships. Help is on the way." Torres' eyes widened. Earth was sending reinforcements. The weight of the words was almost too much to bear. They weren't alone after all. Humanity was fighting back, and the Empire would soon realize that they had made a grave mistake. "Commander Alvarado, this is Captain Torres of the Endeavor," Torres responded, her voice filled with relief. "We've made contact with the Empire's fleet. We need you to move fast. We can't hold them off for long." "We're on our way, Captain." Alvarado's voice came through the comms again, stronger this time. "Hang in there. Help is coming." For the first time in days, Torres allowed herself to relax, just for a moment. Earth wasn't going to leave them to fight alone. They were sending reinforcements. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. But there was no time for celebration. The Empire was still out there, and they would be back soon. The Endeavor needed to be ready. The crew had to be ready. "Get us back into formation," Torres ordered, her voice returning to its usual commanding tone. "We have a battle to fight." The next few hours were a blur of activity. The crew of the Endeavor worked together with a renewed sense of purpose. The engineers pushed forward with repairs, while the tactical officers analyzed the incoming Imperial fleet. The ship wasn't fully operational, but it didn't matter. They were getting help from Earth, and that was enough to ignite a spark of hope within them. "Captain, we've got company," Markson announced from his station. "The Empire's fleet is approaching. They're bringing in reinforcements." Torres looked at the view screen and saw the vast Imperial ships appear on the horizon, their dark shapes looming in the distance. The time had come. "Prepare for battle," Torres said. "Jensen, are we ready to execute the plan?" Jensen gave a sharp nod. "We've got a window of about 20 minutes before their ships close in. We'll need to act quickly." Torres gripped the edge of her chair, her eyes focused. "We'll take that window. We have no other choice." As the Endeavor moved into position, Torres couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had faced the most terrifying force in the galaxy, and now Earth was coming to back them up. Together, humanity was standing strong against the Empire. They weren't just defending Earth anymore. They were defending the right to exist in the stars. The crew gathered in their stations, waiting for the order to strike. The atmosphere on the bridge was tense, but there was a sense of unity, a shared determination that they would survive. "Markson," Torres said, her voice steady, "get us into position. We're going to show the Empire that humanity isn't a species they can crush so easily." Markson nodded. "Aye, Captain." Setting course now. As the Endeavor prepared to make its move, Torres knew that this would be the battle that would define humanity's future. The Empire had underestimated them once. Now they would learn what it meant to face humanity's unbreakable spirit. The Endeavor had taken its position at the edge of the Imperial fleet. Its weapons, still far from fully repaired, hummed with a low power. The ship had been patched up as much as possible, but it wasn't enough to match the overwhelming power of the enemy. The Imperial fleet had arrived with more ships, more weapons, and a battle-hardened attitude. But the humans aboard the Endeavor weren't going down without a fight. Captain Elaine Torres stood at the command chair, her hands gripping the armrests. The tension in the air was thick, the only sounds the faint hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beeping of the consoles. This would be the most difficult battle of her life. The crew had fought hard to get this far, but now the true test would begin. "We're in position, Captain," Lieutenant Markson said, his voice calm despite the growing pressure. "The Imperial fleet is closing in. They're moving into firing range." Torres nodded, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the view screen. The enormous ships of the Empire loomed in front of them, their weapons primed and ready. They had brought more firepower, more advanced technology, but they still hadn't counted on humanity's resilience. "Jensen, is the plan ready?" Torres asked, her voice firm. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jensen, who had been working tirelessly on the strategy, glanced up from her station. "Yes, Captain. We've identified a weak point in the formation. If we can get close enough to their command ship, we can disable their central network. It will cause confusion and break their communications." Torres nodded. This was the only chance they had. They couldn't take on the Empire's fleet head-to-head, but if they could disrupt their operations, it could buy them enough time for Earth's reinforcements to arrive. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Torres ordered. "We're going after their command ship." The crew sprang into action, quickly executing the plan. The Endeavor turned sharply, its engines roaring to life as it cut through the space around them. The Imperial ships fired their weapons, but the Endeavor was fast, darting between blasts and weaving through the oncoming fire. The crew's nerves were tight, their eyes glued to their screens as they avoided one deadly shot after another. "Markson, what's the status on the shields?" Torres asked, her voice tense. "They're holding, Captain," Markson responded, his hands flying over his controls. "We've got about 40% power left, but they won't last long under this kind of pressure." Torres didn't respond. They didn't have time to worry about shields. They had to reach the command ship. The Endeavor raced toward the heart of the Imperial fleet, a daring move that made the entire crew hold their breath. The enemy ships were closing in fast, their weapons targeting the human ship with deadly precision. But the humans aboard the Endeavor were no strangers to danger. Every time the Endeavor avoided a blast, every time it veered to the side just in time, They proved their worth. "Here it comes," Jensen said, her voice calm but tight with tension. "We're approaching the command ship. We need to get within range to launch our attack." Torres nodded. "Ready the hacking tools. Once we're in position, we'll take down their central system." The Endeavour drew closer, its engines roaring in defiance as it darted through the Imperial formation. But the closer they got, the more the Imperial fleet responded. The massive warships fired their weapons, and the Endeavour shook as some of the blasts made contact. Sparks flew from the walls, and the crew held on as the ship rocked violently. "Captain, we're losing shields," Markson shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Hold steady," Torres ordered, her voice commanding. "We can't stop now." The Endeavour was only a few kilometers away from the command ship now. The large Imperial vessel, bristling with weapons, stood like a giant in space, its shields glowing with power. It was everything the humans had feared. Advanced, intimidating, and nearly invulnerable. But Torres knew that the Empire was too confident in its superiority. They hadn't expected a small human ship to challenge them like this. "Now, Jensen," Torres shouted. Jensen worked quickly, her fingers flying across her console as she activated the hacking program. The Endeavour's computers tried to breach the Imperial vessel's network, bypassing its defenses and finding the weak spot. For a few long moments, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden jolt, the lights in the Imperial command ship flickered. The ships around them suddenly stopped firing. Communications went dead. The central network was offline. "We did it," Jensen exclaimed. Torres smiled tightly. "Now we make them pay." The Endeavour turned on a dime, using the moment of chaos to fire its remaining weapons at the Imperial command ship. The blasts hit their mark, and the command ship's outer hull began to crack under the assault. But before they could land the killing blow, the massive Imperial battleship, the one that had appeared before, loomed overhead, its dark silhouette blocking out the stars. The new ship fired without warning, sending a barrage of energy blasts straight at the Endeavour. "We can't take this," Markson shouted. "We're outgunned." Torres' mind raced. They couldn't survive this. But they couldn't give up now. Earth's reinforcements would arrive any minute. They had to hold on. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Torres ordered. "This is it." The Endeavour shot forward, avoiding blast after blast, its shields barely holding. But just as it seemed the end was near, a fleet of ships appeared on the horizon. Earth's reinforcements, as promised. "We're not alone," Markson shouted in disbelief. The Imperial fleet, already shaken by the Endeavour's attack, now faced a fully armed human force. Earth's ships opened fire, their weapons lighting up the sky as they targeted the Imperial fleet. The battle raged on, but the tide had shifted. Humanity had proven they could stand against the Empire. Captain Torres watched as Earth's ships joined the fight. The Empire might have been powerful, but it had underestimated humanity. And now it was going to pay the price. The battle had reached its peak. The Endeavour and Earth's reinforcements were now locked in a desperate fight with the Empire. Captain Elaine Torres gripped the armrests of her chair as the Endeavour dodged another barrage of energy blasts. The ship shuddered under the pressure, but it held together, battered but still fighting. "Captain, we've got incoming fire," Lieutenant Markson shouted, his voice urgent. "The Imperial fleet is regrouping for another strike." Torres didn't flinch. "Counter with our remaining weapons. We can't let them take us down now." The crew was working nonstop, pushing the ship to its limits. The Endeavour had taken damage from nearly every angle, but the humans aboard it were relentless. They fought not just for survival, but for the future of humanity in the galaxy. The Empire had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. On the view screen, the Imperial ships were in disarray. Earth's reinforcements had arrived in force, and the tide of battle had begun to shift. The massive, imposing Imperial warships that had once seemed invincible were now being swarmed by smaller, more agile human ships. The Endeavor had already taken down one of the Empire's command ships, and now Earth's fleet was targeting the rest of the Imperial command structure. "Captain, we've broken their lines," Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jensen announced, her voice filled with relief. "The Imperial fleet is retreating. Their command ship is crippled." Torres exhaled, though she knew this wasn't the end of the fight. The Empire wasn't known for giving up easily. But for the first time since the battle began, she allowed herself a brief moment of hope. "Keep up the pressure," Torres ordered. "We can't let them regroup. We have to finish this." The Endeavor's cannons fired once more, the blasts hitting their targets with precision. Around them, Earth's ships coordinated flawlessly, supporting each other in the chaos of battle. The once dominant Imperial fleet was now on the defensive, retreating into the depths of space. But just as the humans began to believe victory was within their grasp, the largest Imperial battleship of all, bigger than anything the humans had ever faced, emerged from the shadows. It was an awe-inspiring sight, a massive black behemoth that dwarfed even the Empire's other ships. Its weapons were more powerful, its shields nearly impenetrable. "This is it," Torres muttered under her breath. The Empire's final weapon. The Endeavor was small compared to the Imperial battleship, but it had something that the Empire didn't understand: the will to survive. Torres wasn't about to let humanity's fight end here, not when they had come so far. "Jensen, Markson," Torres said, her voice steady, "we're not backing down now. We need to make a final push. We have to take that ship down before it can launch its full assault." "We can do it, Captain," Jensen said, her voice filled with determination. "We've been underestimated from the beginning. But now, they'll see what humanity is capable of." The Endeavor began to move toward the massive Imperial battleship, its engines roaring as it charged into the fray. The Empire's ship unleashed a volley of energy blasts, each one more powerful than anything the Endeavor had faced before. The Endeavor's shields flared under the strain, but they held. "Markson, fire the last of our missiles," Torres shouted. "Target their weak spots. We have one shot at this. We can't take this." Markson shouted. "We're outgunned." Torres' mind raced. They couldn't survive this. But they couldn't give up now. Earth's reinforcements would arrive any minute. They had to hold on. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Torres ordered. "This is it." The Endeavor shot forward, avoiding blast after blast, its shields barely holding. But just as it seemed the end was near, a fleet of ships appeared on the horizon. Earth's reinforcements, as promised. "We're not alone," Markson shouted in disbelief. The Imperial fleet, already shaken by the Endeavor's attack, now faced a fully armed human force. Earth's ships opened fire, their weapons lighting up the sky as they targeted the Imperial fleet. The battle raged on, but the tide had shifted. Humanity had proven they could stand against the Empire. Captain Torres watched as Earth's ships joined the fight. The Empire might have been powerful, but it had underestimated humanity. And now it was going to pay the price. The battle had reached its peak. The Endeavor and Earth's reinforcements were now locked in a desperate fight with the Empire. Captain Elaine Torres gripped the armrests of her chair as the Endeavor dodged another barrage of energy blasts. The ship shuddered under the pressure, but it held together, battered but still fighting. "Captain, we've got incoming fire," Lieutenant Markson shouted, his voice urgent. "The Imperial fleet is regrouping for another strike." Torres didn't flinch. "Counter with our remaining weapons. We can't let them take us down now." The crew was working nonstop, pushing the ship to its limits. The Endeavor had taken damage from nearly every angle, but the humans aboard it were relentless. They fought not just for survival, but for the future of humanity in the galaxy. The Empire had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. On the view screen, the Imperial ships were in disarray. Earth's reinforcements had arrived in force, and the tide of battle had begun to shift. The massive, Imposing Imperial warships that had once seemed invincible were now being swarmed by smaller, more agile human ships. The Endeavor had already taken down one of the Empire's command ships, and now Earth's fleet was targeting the rest of the Imperial command structure. "Captain, we've broken their lines," Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jensen announced, her voice filled with relief. "The Imperial fleet is retreating. Their command ship is crippled." Torres exhaled, though she knew this wasn't the end of the fight. The Empire wasn't known for giving up easily. But for the first time since the battle began, she allowed herself a brief moment of hope. "Keep up the pressure," Torres ordered. "We can't let them regroup. We have to finish this." The Endeavor's cannons fired once more, the blasts hitting their targets with precision. Around them, Earth's ships coordinated flawlessly, supporting each other in the chaos of battle. The once dominant Imperial fleet was now on the defensive, retreating into the depths of space. But just as the humans began to believe victory was within their grasp, the largest Imperial battleship of all, bigger than anything the humans had ever faced, emerged from the shadows. It was an awe-inspiring sight, a massive black behemoth that dwarfed even the Empire's other ships. Its weapons were more powerful, its shields nearly impenetrable. "This is it," Torres muttered under her breath. The Empire's final weapon. The Endeavor was small compared to the Imperial battleship, but it had something that the Empire didn't understand: the will to survive. Torres wasn't about to let humanity's fight end here, not when they had come so far. "Jensen, Markson," Torres said, her voice steady, "we're not backing down now. We need to make a final push. We have to take that ship down before it can launch its full assault." "We can do it, Captain," Jensen said, her voice filled with determination. "We've been underestimated from the beginning, but now they'll see what humanity is capable of." The Endeavor began to move toward the massive Imperial battleship, its engines roaring as it charged into the fray. The Empire's ship unleashed a volley of energy blasts, each one more powerful than anything the Endeavor had faced before. The Endeavor's shields flared under the strain, but they held. "Markson, fire the last of our missiles," Torres shouted. "Target their weak spots. We have one shot at this."